Good afternoon and welcome to the National Press Club in Canberra. And our guest this afternoon is the Prime Minister of Australia, Paul Keating, for a record-making 18th time. All of that done between August the 24th, 1983 and now March the 11th, 2 days before the 1993 federal election. It's been a long-standing tradition in Australian politics that the National Press Club welcomes in the last week of election campaigns the Prime Minister and the Opposition Leader for a campaign-ending address. In fairness, the club would like to point out that at the beginning of this campaign we not only invited Paul Keating to address the National Press Club, but also the Opposition Leader, Dr John Hewson. He initially accepted the invitation to be here, I think would have been last Tuesday. We also at the same time invited him to respond to the Prime Minister's Investing in the Nation statement, which was about 2 days into the campaign. Initially, as I said, they accepted. Subsequently, the Opposition Leader decided that his campaign priorities lay elsewhere. Anyway, without any further ado, I'd like to welcome, as I say, for an 18th time, would you please welcome Paul Keating, Prime Minister of Australia.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much. Thanks very much. Okay, thank you. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Jim. It is a pleasure to be back, as you say, for a record-making rather than a record-breaking appearance. Well, I thought he might have surprised us. I thought, seeing there was an election on Saturday, he might have come along for a debate. I thought he might have stopped impersonating American presidents, stopped running, and come along to answer some questions from the people whose democratic purpose it is to ask them. But no such luck. Dr Hewson has broken one of the traditions of Australian politics. He's in the business of breaking many. We don't have such a lot, of course, homegrown traditions, but one of them is that leaders make themselves accountable to the press in the week before an election. Dr Hewson has not answered a question of substance since Christmas. Every time he's been asked a question of substance, and that's about 3 times, he's fallen over. Dr Hewson has not been able to accommodate anyone who was asking for facts about his so-called plan. His campaign itself has been a falsehood. His imitation of President Clinton's campaign disguises the fact that what Clinton stands for, Hewson despises. Dr Hewson has worn a mask in this campaign. If Australians have not seen behind it yet, they still have 2 days to go. 2 days to peer behind the mask. Dr Hewson has been unable to provide us with facts on the GST. He has said it will create 2 million jobs. He said that consistently. There's not one person in this room, I don't think there's one person in this room who believes that. Dare I say, there's not one economist in Australia who believes that. I venture to say there are a good many people in this room and a good many economists who believe it'll create no jobs, or worse, that it'll actually cost jobs. And of course I'm one of the latter. I'm sure I'm not the only one to have heard reports in recent weeks of companies, in my case, some of the finance houses of Sydney and Melbourne, which are planning layoffs of workers when the GST is introduced. This is the first great deceit of the Hewson campaign. They say the GST will create jobs. The truth is the GST will not create jobs. I'd also venture to say that there's not one person in this room, nor I imagine is there one doctor in Australia, who doesn't know that Dr Hewson is going to rip the heart out of Medicare and leave it a universal health care system in name only. Dr. Hewson would move the Australian health system towards the American system. The American strategy of publicly subsidising private health care and insurance has left 35 million Americans without insurance and given doctors and private health insurance companies the ability to unremittingly jack up health costs, just as they promised to do in Australia in their own journal, which the Sydney Morning Herald ran an extract from yesterday. In the Sydney seat of Lowe, we're told 9 out of 10 doctors promised to increase their fees. It's a case of your money or your health. A doctor's stick-up. American healthcare costs are more than 50% greater than Australia's, 50% greater, and of course a fraction of the service. Last year in the United States, employer spending on healthcare exceeded total after-tax profits. Last year in Australia, employers paid nothing, and were that much more competitive as a result. And I can assure you, if there was a change of government, the first claim of the Australian workforce on the businesses of this country will be to pay their health insurance costs, just like the United States. And we'll see how good that looks against payroll tax. In America, a huge part of the population lives in fear of being sick or injured because of the health bills they would have to pay. Fear of unemployment in the United States is really fear about sickness. It's fear about not just losing your job and not having an income, but actually getting sick while you're out of work. That's what Americans most fear. In Australia, the only thing to fear is the sickness itself. There are waiting lists in health, it's true. In the campaign speech, I announced action to remedy it by contracting out the treatment of public patients in private hospitals. This is additional to the 70 million we've given the states to shorten waiting lists. But if those waiting lists were twice as long, they would not constitute a reason to adopt the American healthcare system. This is the second great deceit of the campaign. The Liberals say they won't destroy Medicare. The fact is they will. I'm also sure that there isn't a single person in this room who doesn't know that Dr. Hewson's industrial relations program will destroy the cooperative ethic on which industrial relations is based, or that he will throw people onto individual contracts and destroy their security, their wages and conditions, and their dignity. That is the third great deceit. Dr. Hewson's industrial relations policy is not designed to reduce unemployment, but to drive wages down. In fact, John Howard still has kept his industrial relations bill secret. Unashamedly, in a bald-faced, brazen way, he's sitting on legislation which is complete and won't show it because he knows it's about cutting the wages and salaries of Australians to ribbons. He knows it's about cutting their wages and salaries to pieces. He's monkey cunning, he's hanging onto it, and he's sitting onto it. I don't believe there's anyone here who doesn't know that Dr. Hewson's plan for Australia is a plan of radical regression, a plan conceived in the bowels of a computer in the late 1970s using the Thatcherite software that was all the rage at Johns Hopkins University in those days. Dr. Hewson's so-called plan for Australia is an old plan that has failed wherever it's been tried, with disastrous economic and social consequences. My great fear is that the damage he could do in 3 years would take us decades to repair. That is, the scramble for gain based on avarice and greed, one group pitted against the other, all clambering, all clutching, all snatching, with heartless contempt for one's fellows. It'll be Gordon Gekko writ large. Then there's the one about selling telecom to an overseas buyer for $20 billion. This is the one from the man who talks about national sovereignty and creating jobs and funding promises. On each of these counts, the telecom sale is a fraud. Does anyone think that Dr. Hewson will get $20 billion for telecom? Anyone, I mean, without a Liberal Party ticket burning in their pocket. Does anybody seriously think there'll be more jobs if telecom is sold? The only way they could get anywhere near 20 billion would be to sell it overseas and remove all protection for Australian consumers and workers. It would mean timed local calls. It would mean a terrible thud, crunch in tariffs for people who live in rural Australia and areas remote from the capital cities. And as well as that, it would mean huge job losses in the cities, in the towns, and another bit of our infrastructure will have gone. Creating jobs in telecom by selling it overseas is about as likely as creating jobs in tourism by making it cheaper to holiday in Honolulu or Bali than it is in Cairns. Which is what the GST will do. If you're going to go to Cairns from Melbourne or Sydney with a GST 15% attached, a lot of people just move over to the international terminal and head for Honolulu or Bali. There's another great deceit. And here is another little one. On every fight back pamphlet that has gone out in the last 12 months, the opposition claims it'll abolish 7 taxes. One of them, the coal export levy, is a standing joke because it's already abolished. There's another one under the heading of customs duties, but customs duty is the duty that's collected on the tariff. The Coalition says it will abolish customs duty, which means it's abolishing tariffs. But when it suits them, they say they are not for zero tariffs, not immediately, in some industries, in some electorates. Of course, both things can't be true. They're either abolishing customs duty and abolishing tariffs, or they're not. The whole plan of Dr. Hewson is simply a deceit. He does not have a plan, he has an obsession. He doesn't have facts, he has gimmicks. And he's only one fact at his disposal: unemployment. The figures released today offer the one big negative fact of our national life at present. Unemployment is the great curse of the 90s, and it's apparent again in today's figures. Essentially, they are as you were figures, which makes the point that unemployment is going to be an immensely difficult problem to deal with, and it won't be fixed quickly. That's why we need the full focus of the nation's energies, and why we don't need those energies dissipated in a divisive, unseemly scramble over a piece of the national cake. The figures mean simply that unemployment is too high. They also show that the unemployment rate may be flattening out, as the trend series shows graphically in today's bulletin, which is consistent with recent statistics showing that the economy is picking up. But this is really beside the point. If unemployment has in fact peaked, that's no reason for complacency. There's certainly no comfort for the unemployed. It's certainly no comfort for them. The central issue, therefore, is which party is best equipped to deal with unemployment. And that means which party will succeed best at getting the economy moving. It also poses the question, which party is best equipped to help the unemployed directly? There's no simple answer to unemployment, but there is no doubt that the best answer in the long term and the short term is economic growth. And the way to get growth is by investing, and our efforts are aimed precisely at this point. Our efforts, meaning the government's efforts, are aimed entirely precisely at this point: investment in Australian companies by Australian companies. By contrast, it seems to me, beyond doubt, that Dr. Hewson's so-called plan will not be a remedy, but a new disease. If unemployment is our greatest problem now, how much worse will it be if we stifle the recovery with a 15% tax on virtually everything we buy and everything we use? How much worse will it be if we deal with the problem of unemployment in an atmosphere of industrial and social turmoil? I mean, how much focus will we get to the problem while everyone is scrabbling over their share? How much harder will it be to find solutions or to find the concerted national will to solve the problem if the rest of the population is divided, insecure and rancorous? If unemployment's an ugly fact now, How much worse will it be without a universal healthcare system to help people who are unemployed in their sickness, or with an unfair education system which bars their kids from entry? If unemployment's a tragedy now, how much worse will it be with $10 billion taken out of the budget? How much worse will it be with social security spending cut? How much worse with funding for regional areas cut? How much worse with cuts to state services like state schools? How much worse with $800 million cut out of funds for the unemployed and people left to wait much longer on those benefits, the labour market programs gutted? If unemployment is the worst fact of our national life at present, how much worse will it be if government gets out of the way, as Dr Hewson says it should, and people are left to fend entirely for themselves? How much worse will it be if we put inflation back in the system? How much worse will it be if we add a tax burden and an accountancy burden and a time burden to the small businesses which we know are going to drive growth and create jobs? Since the campaign started, a raft of positive indicators have appeared illustrating our economic progress. Today's figures on job vacancies and retail sales were the most encouraging. Tuesday's figures, on job vacancies and retail sales were the most encouraging since 1990. Our export figures have been positive. Indeed, they've been the best for years. Today, this very day, if you distill the politics out of this morning's press, you'll find unequivocally positive economic news. There's a story about our continuing export surge, another about our growing manufacturing sector, another about an Australian company landing a $1 billion contract in Laos. There's much more, but John Hewson, of course, won't tell you. For 12 months, wherever there has been hope, he's counselled despair. That's why today I've released a document accompanying this speech which describes some of the good things which are happening in Australia right now and which Dr Hewson refuses to talk about. There is no question that the direction we are going in is the right one. We are going too slowly to lower the unemployment figure, but that's not a reason for changing course, for going backwards. It's no reason for going into reverse. It's a reason for accelerating progress where we can, and we've done this by lowering company tax rates, by introducing an investment allowance of 20%, and by cultivating a new banking culture. Every sensible thing that can be done to speed the pace of recovery and long-term reform is being done or is proposed for a second Keating government. And the things we do are all directed at the goal of creating employment and helping the unemployed through with training and other forms of assistance, not leaving them in the lurch as Dr Hewson would propose to do. Some of you will have seen the statistics released this week on the success of labour market programs. They're working, they're helping thousands and thousands of Australians. So why wreck the recovery? Why wreck the safety net, the humane and constructive government interventions? Why wreck the social fabric of Australia? My message for those people who are presently wondering whether to desert the Labor government is to think very carefully. Think about what you would lose. Think well about what you would lose. In an election, the choice is not between one party and a vacuum. It's a choice between two parties. Ask yourself whether by voting for policies which are proven failures elsewhere in the world, you won't be punishing Australia and the next generation of Australians. Ask yourself whether the absolute hollowness, the absolute fraudulence of Dr Hewson's campaign is not an indication that a vote for Dr Hewson is a leap into the dark. To the people of Australia between now and Saturday, I would say, every time you hear Dr Hewson say he has a plan, ask yourself, but do I understand? Do I understand it? Has he explained it to me? And the answer is no, or maybe, don't vote for him. In this forum this week, in this place this week, Dr Hewson had a chance to explain his so-called plan, a chance to explain how it would create a single job, how it would not destroy the social fabric of Australia, how it differs from the plans of Thatcher, Reagan, Douglas and Mulroney. He had a chance to explain it in this club and he refused. He chose to play soccer and shout slogans instead. Let me give you the oldest advice in the world to the people who are contemplating the big jump. Don't do it. For your own sake, don't do it. But not only for your own sake, don't do it. For Australia's sake, don't do it. For your kids' sake, don't do it. Now, as Jim said earlier, I've been at the Press Club 18 times in the last decade. I've been 4 times in the past year. I don't know how many press conferences I've given in the last 12 months or how many doorstops that my staff said I let go on too long. I don't believe it can be said that I've ever run away from scrutiny or from the opportunity to explain our policies or failed to face up to the ramifications of those policies. As Treasurer and then Prime Minister, I've taken full responsibility for the economic and social affairs of Australia. And all the responsibility that is mine, I will shoulder. All the damage that the recession has done, I'll attempt to repair. Every sensible thing that can be done will be done. Much of it is already being done, and I want a chance to build on this. As I said in the campaign launch, 15 years ago, I began to imagine an Australia which not only exported minerals and farm products, but sophisticated manufacturers. The thought occurred to me and a few of my colleagues that Australia could be what no one had really ever imagined it could be, and that is a country integrated with the world, focused on the region, competitive, creative, sophisticated, secure. And as every one of you know, this is happening. And as anyone old enough and compos mentis in the 70s will know what a huge change there has been. You've heard the figures. Nearly 1/4 of our total product, exporting 70% of it to Asia, exporting quantities of elaborately transformed manufactures we never dreamed we could make. Some of you will have seen the McKinsey report on the new breed of Australian company which is emerging. Some of you will have noticed that in the last 2 months, a $2 billion contract's been signed by BHP with the Vietnamese government. Could you imagine that in the 70s? And yesterday, a $1 billion hydroelectric project in Laos, one of the largest construction projects yet in Indochina. These things are happening as a result of a conscious decision by the Australian people to change. These things are happening because we intended them to happen. The new Australia, the Australia of the 90s, will be different from the Australian of any other era. And the essential difference will be this. The Australia of the 90s will be one entirely conceived by Australians and brought into being by Australians and wearing the stamp Australia on everything it does. Now I say that all of this is at stake on Saturday. Our economic future is at stake, and so is the quality of our society, the Australian stamp of our society. So much is at risk. A society where childcare is finally a right, a society which believes women should get equal pay and be able to participate fully in all areas of work and life, a society which cherishes those who spend part of their lives caring for children or sick people. Those of you who know me will know what I believe. Whatever my faults, I don't think hiding my beliefs is one of them. Very simply, I believe in creating a high-wage, high-skill and high-productivity Australia. John Hewson believes in a low-wage, low-productivity country. John Hewson believes in dismantling the public sector. He hates the public sector. I believe in making the public sector, as it is in every successful country, more efficient, more people-oriented. John Hewson believes in fear in the workplace. He wants fear as the element in all of the Australian workplaces. I believe in cooperation and creativity in all Australian workplaces. John Hearson believes in private health insurance. I believe in sharing our personal health care risks through a national public and private system working in cooperation. John Hearson believes in zero tariffs as an end in itself. I believe in using tariff reform as a fair benchmark to improve our industry with long-term plans and safeguards. John Hearson believes in American razzmatazz and hoopla and carefully staged passion plays and bun fights, and American advisors and American advertising cynics and gurus, and the constant reiteration of poll-driven phrases. I don't believe in it myself. I think it's an assault on good democratic Australian traditions. I think it's rubbish. I think one should face the music, scratchy, discordant, unpleasant music though it may be. I think you have to say what you believe and be prepared to defend it in detail. This way at least, when people vote on Saturday, they'll know what they'll get with Paul Keating. To judge him by his campaign, but the same cannot be said of John Hearson. Finally, let me say this. If people are not convinced by Dr Hearson's intention to oppose the GST, to make Medicare a universal health system in name only, to destroy the basic rights of workers and the cooperative ethic of the Australian workplace, to turn our colleges and universities into businesses, to set back our environment programs a generation or more, if they're not convinced that Dr Hearson's policies represent a threat to our way of life and our values, perhaps it will help to think of it in philosophical terms. Dr Hearson's philosophy is based on the idea of self-interest and survival of the fittest. Remember what Margaret Thatcher said? She said, "There's no such thing as society, only individuals making their way." This is Dr Hearson's philosophy. He doesn't believe in society as a whole. He wants to impose this barren, sterile idea on Australia. That's what he means by breaking the mould. What he doesn't like about Australia is the humanitarian collective ethos, the one that is there in Australia from the beginning of our European history until now. Think about it. The heroes of Australia have always been and remain the champions of the underdog. Now, this may not fit well with the economics that Dr Hearson believes in, but it fits well with Australia. It's what we are, it's sprung from our history, it's what unites us, it's our principal bond between us. I hope we never see the day when our traditions are subverted by the doctrine of unmitigated self-interest. That's Dr Hearson's doctrine. If I fought him on nothing else as an Australian, I'd fight him on this. So if you're not persuaded that ripping up the social wage and introducing a giant flat tax will irrevocably damage the fabric and the way and life of Australia, be persuaded by this. Be persuaded by the philosophical change, the statements in the ethics. Be persuaded by all those statements Dr Hearson has made in the last couple of years, the most telling of which was the one in the budget reply when he said, we must not reach back for people because they'll drag us down. The statement that should have disqualified him The statement that should have disqualified him from practising further in Australian public life. And this goes to the heart of it. Ultimately, this is the nature of the risk. John Hearson has been projecting a more temperate image in recent weeks, of course. But perhaps the best reminder of John Hearson's old fight back one persona came back in January in a speech by Ashley Goldsworthy, the Liberal Party's federal president. Goldsworthy said Australia needed a jolt. He said, life is to become tougher, he said, with less security and greater uncertainty. So be warned. This is the brave new world of John Hearson. Dog eat dog. Let the lucky and the rich prosper and the rest gather the crumbs that fall. Dr Hearson is an unashamed theorist of trickle-down economics. If he's allowed to become a practitioner of this theory, he'll turn Australia on its head. Call it scaremongering if you like. I do fear for Australia, I fear for the people, I fear for all those things which bind us together, in which we believe above all other things. But it's not scaremongering, it's fact-mongering, exposing the facts which Dr Hearson won't reveal by his non-appearance this week at the Press Club or anywhere else. I'm absolutely sure that Dr Hearson will be bad for Australia. His agenda is radical, disruptive and destructive. I sincerely hope and believe Australians will recognise that they cannot take the risk. Thank you.
You can't have your encore first. Prime Minister, you talked yourself of the discordant, scratchy music, and I think it's about time for that. It's not. It's certainly not going to be Mahler, but some questions from, to use the terminology of modern pop music, the greatest grunge outfit in Australia, the Press Gallery. A series of questions from our media members. There are plenty of them, and the first one comes from Julie Flynn.
Julie Flynn, Radio 2UE and affiliated stations. Your main argument today has been that the opposition will make things worse, but you've also conceded that unemployment is stuck in a groove. Today's job figures show last month's growth in jobs has disappeared. The raw number of unemployed continues to climb over the 1 million mark. Youth unemployment's up to 32.5%, and we now have the longest period of sustained unemployment, over 10% since the Depression. Why would people who've been affected by unemployment, the recession, high interest rates, trust you for a fifth time?
Well, I don't think unemployment necessarily is stuck in the groove. I think the way to look at the number is to say that the trend series shows that unemployment has peaked and is flattening out, which means that the prospect of it coming down looks on the latest figures rather better. That is, with retail sales running as strongly as they have, with exports running as strongly as they have, with national production up, with the other figures of recent days and recent weeks, the job vacancies, the ANZ job vacancy series up 5%, the CES notified vacancies up 13% on the equivalent period 12 months earlier, DEET's leading indicators. All of these things, I think, give you an indication that that the figures, the strength coming through the economy and the labour market mean that we're probably seeing unemployment peak, and hopefully we're starting to see it trend off.
Laura Tingle.
Okay, off the stage, go on. Away you go.
Laura Tingle from the Australian Prime Minister. Most of your speech today has been addressed at Dr. Hewson's agenda, and that you're... and towards saying why you would be offering more of the same, essentially why you think it's worked to date. But what mandate do you think you would gain if you actually did win office on Saturday? What do you think the mandate would be? Why do you really believe that people would be saying, yes, we really do want more of the same, when you've given them 3 years of recession in your last term?
Well, what is the same? Is the same as the 70s? Is it the same of the torpor of the 60s and 70s? Of course it isn't. It's more of the BHPs getting $2 billion contracts in Vietnam. It's more of the $1 billion contracts in Laos. It's more of the exports, it's more of the transformation, it's more education, it's more product innovation, it's more best practice in Australian companies, it's more cooperation at the workplace, it's more productivity focused, it's more cooperation, it's more decency, it's more collective national strength. Now, to put all that asunder, because we've been through a recession, and to take the greedy, grubby, scratching politics and policies of the opposition, which would put Australians one against the other and lose that whole competitive and cooperative ethos and ethic, would be to put our future down. And that's why I believe that the government offers not only the best prospects in the 90s, but the best prospects of getting back to stronger growth and better employment. It's only by getting investment going will we be able to do that. It's only by reducing the tax on business, as the government proposes, in reducing the company tax rate from 39% to 33%, in accelerated depreciation, in a further investment allowance. It's only by a break to capital will you get the investment, not by putting the company tax rate up to 42%, as Dr Hewson proposes, not by putting a 24,000 million GST on business and making them collect it, not by slowing the economy down with a massive spending tax, but only by putting a charge into the investment and seeing it come down into the economy. And the charge is by way of a reduction in company rates, will give Australia the same tax rate as company tax rate as Singapore, much the same as the Asian region, while Dr Hewson goes the opposite way. This is why I believe the government can get the economy growing even faster than it is now, and it's now growing at 2.5%. Why I believe we can get investment moving and with it employment. So the aim should be to learn by what happened in the recession and go on to do bigger and better things, but not to take our recessionary experience and regress and go back to the willful, mindless policies of Margaret Thatcher's Britain or Reagan's America, to go back to the sort of greed is good syndrome, which is where the opposition wants to take it, with all the problems which will attend it.
The next question comes from Malcolm Farr.
Prime Minister, Malcolm Farr from the Telegraph Mirror. You failed to make industrial relations an issue of the magnitude you would have wanted in this campaign. The private polling and your own Labor Party polling shows it's just not sizzling away as you would like it. Is that because 10 years of the cooperative ethic of the Accord has produced 11% unemployment and people aren't convinced that what you call the divisive, unseemly scramble of the opposition's policies don't look that bad?
Well, I think that it is an issue in the campaign, and I think it would be a misjudgment by journalists to underestimate it. I think Dr Hewson and Mr Howard's brazenness in sitting on industrial legislation which can affect everyone's income and conditions of employment is understood by the electorate, and they regard that sort of brazen behaviour poorly, and they're worried about it. They're worried about their jobs, and I think the message has got through that John Hewson has one policy with two arms, two prongs. That is, tax up, wages down. Tax up with the GST, wages down by wage cuts delivered through a draconian industrial relations system, one which Sir Richard Kirby said this morning would be unfair and could lead to violence. I mean, that's the sort of policies which I think people are worried about. But I've got some details from the Victorian employment contracts, and they're very interesting. It says just in one company, the contract is being presented to all new starters. Penalty rates, it takes away penalty rates and overtime rates, any limits on hours worked, paid public holidays, they're either worked at the ordinary time rate or to be taken unpaid, plus superannuation is deducted from the base rate of salary, instant dismissal for a wide range of reasons, including distributing written or printed matter without consent, and loitering in lavatories. Yeah, that's right. That's it. And of course, it is journos themselves who it is journalists themselves who would be most at risk by such contracts, as they are professional loiterers. And then there's another. Where the contract takes away weekend penalty rates, overtime rates and standard spread of hours. It takes away the 30-minute meal break, superannuation, and workers are changed from permanent to casual without being compensated by casual loading. A worker who is late or absent within 2 hours' notice, without 2 hours' notice, has to pay the wages of the rest of the workers in that group for the length of time that worker is absent. Workers will not find out what their base rate of pay will be until they sign the contract. Or if we look in the medical industry, one contract here takes away penalty rates for weekend work and public holidays, shift allowances, reduces annual leave, sick leave and overtime rates, plus 4 nurses and medical receptionists are to be sacked for refusing to accept the contract. The average cut to take-home pay is about 35% or $151 a week, and the employers refuse to take the employees' union. The contract's recommended by the AMA. Now, yeah, that's right, that vicious little organisation. Now, these are the sort of things which industrial relations, which will be par for the course under John Hewson's industrial relations. And is everyone going to accept that in the cooperative spirit of the last 10 years? Or are they going to get in and kick and thrash and claw and tear, which is of course exactly what they'll do. And why wouldn't they? That's why I think industrial relations is a sleeper in this election. I think people do understand it, and they're not going to be convinced by little Johnny Howard's bluster on radio saying, how could I show it to the public without showing it to my colleagues first? I mean, even that I thought would have made him blush, but it didn't.
The next question is from Randall Markey.
Randall Markey from the West Australian Prime Minister. Is it unfortunate and a bad example to the electorate that on the very day it is shown that 1,052,800 people are out of work in Australia, that politicians, including the Prime Minister, get a pay rise? I'm just wondering, are you prepared to scrap it? Given that the wages deal with the ACTU is contingent upon the creation of 500,000 jobs minimum in the next 3 years, why not link MPs' pay to future job growth?
Well, MPs' pay is linked to public service salaries, and MPs' pay has fallen behind the rest of the community over the last 10 years. The fact of the matter is that MPs are now no longer treated specially or separately. They only adjusted with the whole of the Commonwealth Public Service. And of course, they're adjusted only on community standards by any measure, and 1.4%, you'd hardly say that that's an extravagant claim, even with modest inflation. So I don't think it's right or decent to draw the link between today's unemployment figure and the 1.4%. It's a sort of gimmicky question that I expect from the worst newspaper in the country, the West Australian.
Next question from Tony O'Leary.
Tony O'Leary from the Herald Sun, Prime Minister. Prime Minister, I wonder if you've been describing the GST as the most pernicious tax in Australia's history. I wonder why you're insisting also that a future Labor government can't unscramble the egg, why you won't commit a future Labor government to abolishing it. And also, during the election campaign, you've also been insisting that there's a push on into Asia. I wonder if you could tell us then why Singapore Airlines didn't get a slice of the Qantas action under your government.
Well, let me deal with the second question first, because they wouldn't pay for it. And we weren't going to give it away, Tony. It's as simple as that. But they were given every opportunity. They were encouraged. I actually saw their chief executive officers in Singapore during my visit there. They were encouraged. In the end, they thought they could have it on the cheap, and they found otherwise. As it is with British Airways, most British investment in airlines in Asia were tied up in Cathay Pacific. And when that went to other owners, the former BOAC or British Airways had virtually no routes in the Asia-Pacific area. There's a very nice fit between British Airways and Qantas, and it's because of the niceness of that fit that British Airways paid more money, and that's why they received it. But let me go to the other question, which is a question of greater significance, and that is the question of why a consumption tax can't be repealed. The fact is, when you take $24 billion from people and set up a system like this and then disperse the proceeds, that's the end of it. There's no way of reversing it. There's no way that any government could come in and reimpose the kind of taxes that we have with the likes of payroll tax, or change the changed outlays priorities of a government based on those sorts of revenues. Once this thing is in, it's in forever. And I think that's what the Australian public should know. I mean, they may say, we've had the recession, why should we re-elect the government? But if they re-elect the government, in 3 years' time they get another choice. They never get another choice with the GST. It's here forever. And that's the point I made the other day with John Hewson. He said, what could be worse than another 3 years of Labor? And it's a very simple answer, a GST forever. And that is the fact of it. That is, this is an enormous step, and it's this is the first country in the world that'll have a free choice about whether it has a GST. All the others were imposed by governments in office without choice. Those other communities never really had a chance to say no. Australians have a chance to say no. They've had a chance to think about it, and they've been warned. They've been warned by the Canadians, they've been warned by New Zealand, and they've been warned by the British. And I don't know whether you noticed today in a news report that in a wire service report, Britain is now considering increasing its VAT from 17.5%, increasing the rate. And it said, on VAT there are various options, including a widening in the tax base to cover such items as magazines, newspapers, food, energy and children's clothing. And it went on to say, an increase in Britain's value-added tax, which is a GST, is high on the agenda for next week's UK budget, which comes 3 days after Australia votes. So here's another warning signal from Britain, as if the large one we had from Canada wasn't significant or sufficient, or the constant declarations and protestations from New Zealand don't give us the warning that we've got a free choice in this matter. Don't take it. Don't take a GST. This community can make that judgment and can make that decision and not be locked into it to find that we're stuck with it forever.
Peter Charlton.
Peter Charlton from the Courier Mail, Prime Minister. Queensland's a state that seems to have weathered the recession better than many others, yet Wayne Goss has warned of a collapse in the Labor vote. Do you share that pessimism? If so, what do you put it down to, the collapse in the Labor vote? Do you find such warnings helpful?
Well, I don't think the Labor vote has collapsed. It might have gone off the boil somewhat, but again, that doesn't necessarily imply we'll lose any seats from it. And I'm not sure that the tactic of saying to people that, trying to hurry them back into the tent, as it's put, telling people that one party or another's off the boil so that their traditional supporters will sort of scurry back to them, is a tactic of worth. I think the public are smart enough to make their own judgments about all these things. And that's why I believe that the government's position is strong enough to see it returned, that the seats can be identified and have been identified by people on both the Labor and the Conservative side of politics.
Tom Burton.
Tom Burton from the Australian Financial Review, Mr Keating. Could you outline your intentions regarding your ministry if you're re-elected? How extensively do you intend to reshape the Cabinet and the Ministry? And what principles will you use to choose your ministry? For example, will you be wedded to the normal factional split where members get a ministry not necessarily because of ability but because of factional alignment? And will you also reject the traditional distributions which have often led to the same result and demand that you should be free to choose the best ministry possible?
Well, I think the return of the government provides the Federal Parliamentary Labor Party with a great opportunity, particularly as is well known, quite a number of members of the current ministry will be not either contesting the election or retiring. So this creates a number of natural vacancies, and as well as that, after each election, there is always the option of the parliamentary party to choose new people. And I would think this presents an opportunity for choosing younger people, fresh people, and I think it would give us a great opportunity to reinvigorate the government from a party which has in its backbench quite a number of people who will make a major contribution, can make a major contribution to our national life. It's a great opportunity for us, and I'm quite sure the Parliamentary Labor Party would not let it pass by without taking that opportunity up.
Brendan Burns.
Brendan Burns from the Press, New Zealand. Prime Minister, if you win on Saturday, will there be an improvement in the relationship with New Zealand, or do the differences over industrial and other policies mean that that will continue to be marred at a political level and at the CER level?
Oh, I don't think there's any problem in relations between Australia and New Zealand. We've got, this is not a party matter. We've got members of the Labor Party in New Zealand coming over to sell us their barren creed. We have members of the Conservative parties over there trying to sell us the same stuff. It's all taken with the sport. I think that we know and understand it to be. But essentially, New Zealand's place in Australia is best reflected, of course, in those constitutional caveats, which are there, always there, waiting. For New Zealanders to join us in the most complete way possible.
Ross Peake.
Ross Peake from the Canberra Times, Prime Minister. Immigration numbers have gone down because of the recession. Excuse me. If you're re-elected, can you give us an idea of what immigration numbers might do, given that we've now got growth in the economy? Do you think in mid-year they'd be set to go up, stay the same, or come down further?
Well, we've cut the migration intake back from about 140,000 a year to about 80,000 a year. So it's just on half of what it was 2.5 or 3 years ago. And that's because the economy is not producing as much employment, therefore we're not taking as many people. But we don't abandon the program altogether because you can't wind it up quickly when you need it to make those additions to the labour market, that complementary quality to our society which immigration has brought. I think we just make a judgment as time goes on about the strength of the economy, the lift in the labour market, and see then whether we can make a judgment to increase the intake. But that would be a matter for seeing at the time.
Ray Brindle.
Ray Brindle, Night Reader Financial News, Prime Minister. You mentioned in your speech the unequivocally positive economic news, yet only about 10 days ago Mr Dawkins virtually endorsed a post-election rate cut. What caused the big change in your government's view, and indeed is economic growth now sufficiently strong to preclude any further interest rate cuts?
Well, back in January I think the bank itself said there was a case for, they could see a case for a reduction in interest rates except for the exchange rate. Volatility on the exchange rate, well the exchange rate settled down in the meantime, and can I say also that this government doesn't have a wages problem. If a coalition government's elected with a GST, an inflation problem rattling down the road and a huge wages problem, I think the Reserve Bank and its board would be most loath to cut interest rates. But I think upon the return of a Labor government, where we don't have such problems, it might be then possible for the bank and the government to make an early move on rates. That is, given the fact that we've got Accord Mark 7 in place, we've got a low inflationary environment at the moment, and heaps of productivity.
The next question is from Ken Davidson.
Ken Davidson, The Age, Prime Minister. You've painted Dr. Houston as an economic rationalist, warts and all. Are you really also an economic rationalist who's attempting to paint yourself with a pretty face at the moment?
Well, I tell you what I'm not, Ken. I'm not an economic irrationalist. But nor am I a slave to the nostrums of the market, so that the market is only right and always right, and I never have been. I never have been. I mean, when I introduced, or when I was party to the decision which made the cross-media rule in our media, I thought that intervention in that industry was necessary because the market wouldn't sort it out. Well, it would sort it out all right. It would have been all owned by two people. And that's why I believe that one had to make such a decision. It's why I believe that prudential supervision of banks should be put into legislation, that it wasn't no longer appropriate to have a phone call up and down Martin Place and everything would be hunky-dory, that we needed actually to put it into law. So I mean, never have I believed that, that the market, and the pursuit of income and the pursuit of rewards is the sole way to go. That's what John Hewson believes. But the great furphy that he's putting to us in this is that he's saying if we introduce a major GST and we cut the price of petrol in a country which already has cheap petrol in world terms, and we abolish payroll tax, a relatively minor tax, which has not been in the public debate until now, not for recently. If we abolish payroll tax and cut petrol, presto, we'll have a new society and a new country. Now, what total rubbish, what total and complete rubbish, that to change an economy like Australia to a sophisticated manufacturing and services country fuelled by a good education system, to change all that and deal with all of those sectoral areas of the microeconomy, transport, wharves, air transport, land transport, telecommunications, workplace culture. They're the things that have to change. But to think you can change all that by abolishing payroll tax and cutting the price of petrol. If I'd have stood up and said that to you in any one of 16 or 17 statements in the last 10 years, you'd have laughed me out of this room. And yet that's the central thesis of the opposition's fight back policy. It's an absolute fraud of a policy. And it's supposedly all relying upon if we clear everything, clear the decks and let the rich have a clean go at it, we'll be all better off. Now that's the reward and the greed stakes. That's the Gordon Gekko view, and that's why John Hewson is still chanting incantations at Liberal Party rallies, because he can't defend that policy. It's indefensible. How could you say, in a country that doesn't need a consumption tax, that we're loaded up with a $24 billion GST, and then we'll abolish payroll tax and cut the price of petrol, and all of a sudden, presto, we have a new country? That's what he's told us. It's rubbish.
The next question is from Don Wolford.
Don Wolford from Australian Associated Press, Mr. Keating. I'd like to ask, in the context of what you've said about fairness, a question about Accord 7 and its links between job growth and wages. Isn't it true that under the Accord it will be those workers who fail to secure an enterprise agreement and who thus require safety net provisions who will be asked to forego wage rises if your job growth expectations aren't met? Doesn't that mean, therefore, that the full burden of wage constraint will fall exclusively on that part of a workforce which almost by definition is the lowest paid and the industrially weakest?
Well, I think it means, Don, that those in the, if you like, the more competitive areas of the labour market find their own wage increase through a productivity change. In other words, there's no cost to the employer. They negotiate an enterprise agreement where productivity increases and the reward is split between profits and wages. So that's the position we're talking about. But if we're talking about costs to business and cost to industry, we're saying let there not be costs, other than the event that we can see progress in the economy and progress towards higher levels of employment. And where we can see that, we'll then find those sort of costs are not going to impair our national progress. Now, I think that balance is pretty good. And I might add, mind you, that a lot of those people will find that as people in the lower deciles of the income of the income system will also have the benefits of our tax cuts, which are cutting the middle rate from 38 cents to 30 cents in the dollar without a GST. And that will also supply them with benefits. And that's why in Accord Mark 7, the tax cuts are regarded importantly for those reasons. So, but if we are growing, and we have demonstrable progress towards an achievable minimum of 500,000 jobs over 3 years, therefore then the cost to be borne by business in general, we think, are reasonable ones, because the volume that will come from the economy will see their bottom line be in much better shape.
The next question is from Bradley Perrott.
Bradley Perrott, Prime Minister, from Reuters. Last night when Paul Lanham asked you to say sorry for the million unemployed, you explained those parts of the problem that weren't your fault, such as the international economy. I wonder if you'd explain to us which parts were your fault.
I mean, no government can go through a change like this without making mistakes. The change of this a huge magnitude. And I think interest rates stayed on too high for too long. But again, can I say, monetary policy is not operated exclusively by the government. Let me say that I would have brought the rates down much more rapidly, but I could only do it by dragging the Reserve Bank along with me. Now, nobody in this election is imputing to the Reserve Bank. No one in this election is imputing any blame for the unemployment of the Reserve Bank. It falls upon the Prime Minister or the Treasurer, in my case, having been both, onto me. And yet monetary policy is actually decided by an appointed board that's not elected and has no reference to the way in which the economy operates. I think that it may be possible to design a different system of monetary management in this country, one where the accountability is clear and one which also takes account of the needs of sensible monetary management. Because I think that in the end, to have the government of the day bearing responsibility when the responsibility is shared for these things is not good, and also it's not democratic. Secondly, can I say though, that I don't accept and will never accept responsibilities for the bond corporations, the elders takeovers, the state banks of South Australia and Victoria. I had a state bank under my management. It was called the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, and it finished the 80s in fine fettle. Its price is booming. Its share price is now booming on the Australian stock exchanges. That's what the stock market thinks of it. And we, after all, there was no profligacy on the part of the government. We cut government spending back by 30,000 million a year. We cut it back by 6 to 7% of GDP, ipso facto making the private sector 30,000 million a year better off. They sprayed it round like a garden hose. And in the end, they want me to take responsibility for their behaviour. Now, most of them, of course, are no longer managing the companies. Most of the people who perpetrate are no longer managing the companies. And at least their shareholders caught up with them as the electorate didn't. And I think this is a lesson that Australians have learned, and particularly the financial system, and that is that one can't go chasing growth without cost, indiscriminate growth without cost, and that's the lesson that Westpac and the ANZ and other banks have learned to their cost. And we'll end up in the result with a much smarter banking system and a better financial market and a much saner country. But these are the good things to focus on and not say, well, we had those problems, let's turn ourselves back to the 60s and the 70s of the them and us. Let's rip and tear and claw and let the doctors in for their chop and let the companies rip away at workers' pay by individual wage contracts. Let's have the survival of the fittest context. Let's go back to the bad old days. Let's go back to the bad old days of Australian industrial life, because we happen to be beset with the same problem as the United States, Britain, Canada, Western Europe, Japan, and that was a business bubble that had to burst. And in the change in the cycle, we've all worn the down cycle. And it is that down cycle I say learn from, but don't use it as an excuse, as John Hewson wants to retreat backwards to bad policy and the bad old days of industrial confrontation and division.
Michael Millett.
Michael Millett, Sydney Morning Herald. What will be your major priority if re-elected on Saturday? What will be your first legislative measure? And just in response to your last question, isn't that what Dr Hewson's proposing in relation to monetary policy?
Oh no, Dr Hewson's saying let's give an independent Reserve Bank draconian powers. Let us, then the government, hide behind it and let a group of appointed people rip the economy to pieces as they see fit in pursuit of inflation-only objectives, with no objectives in there for employment. You see, we've had a balance between the employment and price stability objectives of the Reserve Bank as described in the Reserve Bank Act. He's saying let's remove that balance. Let's get employment out of there. Let's focus just on inflation. So you can imagine with the GST adding about 4 to 5% of inflation to prices, to the economy, and the Reserve Bank being told that it must reduce that to under 2% and not take any heed of the employment consequences, the Reserve Bank would just hop into the economy with high interest rates. That's what John Hewson has in store. That's not what I'm talking about at all. I'm talking about continuing that focus upon employment and getting that balance between employment and price stability in the right kind of way. Now, you did ask me earlier, first part of the question. Oh, legislative priorities? Well, I think our legislative priority would be to see that the things that we have undertaken to do in respect of companies, the 33% company rate, the further additional depreciation allowance of 10%, that those things go in quickly so that we can get that investment moving, that people can see that they're going to be taxed at Asian tax rates, and that therefore, with a further investment allowance on top of the 10% that already exists for the projects over 50 million, that the whole thing will get started. And I think that is the key thing to get that 130 billion of projects nominated by their proponents off the stocks and into expenditure.
Bruce Juddery.
Bruce Juddery, Campus Review today. You've just dumped on the Reserve Bank and said that they wouldn't take your line on the reduction of interest rates.
Well, I didn't dump on them, I'm just making a point that it's not exclusively the government's preserve.
Do you want to bet what's in the Fin Review and the Business Australian tomorrow?
Well, no one's going to. There's only 40,000 read those things.
Okay, well that's your problem. It's not getting around. Give yourself a chance to really spread it around the country.
Now, come on, Bruce,
the coalition's policy poll. I always address men by if they call me by my front name, I'll call them by theirs. Ladies,
as long as you get to the question.
Yes, okay. Well, and if you don't, and if you'd stop interrupting, I'd do so. The coalition promises independence to the Reserve Bank. It's independence to do one thing, and that is control inflation. They also promise independence to the universities. Is there any evidence that they're being any less generous there? Is there any evidence that they're promising universities independence to do anything other than what they tell them to do? That's on behalf of my 3 days a week employer.
Well, they want to turn universities into business organisations. They want to make universities fee-charging institutions, full fee-charging institutions, so they can become business organisations selling the services of education. That's what they want to do. But in doing that, they would pass up one of the central tenets of Australian life, and that is that a child of ability has a right to a tertiary education, regardless of their family's parental income or circumstance. And of course in tertiary, in vocational education, they want to do something else. They want to provide vouchers to 16 and 17 and 18-year-old young people to go and design for themselves their own place in vocational education, to negotiate with an employer time off for training away from the job, from institutions that won't exist because they don't want to fund them, but they say will spring up commercially if there are enough vouchers around to receive them and provide an income to fund the investments of a TAFE college, a private TAFE college. Now, what would happen is that many hundreds of thousands of Australians, young Australians, would never be trained. For a start, their negotiating position with employers, particularly in a labour market like this, would be so weak as to mean they wouldn't be able to negotiate time off. You can imagine a 16 or 17-year-old walking around with a voucher looking for an institution to go to. Even if they were able to design the course for themselves, we just wouldn't have the capacity to take them, because John Hewson is not committed to the 730 million that I put in One Nation for our vocational education system. And therefore, it would mean that the unfairness in tertiary education was extended to vocational education, but under the same principle that the market will work to provide education where in fact it's not a market matter. This is a point Ken Davidson made earlier. It's not a market matter. The market has its place, but it doesn't have its place cutting across one of the central nostrums of Australian life, and that is the right to an education.
Next question. The next question comes from A. Corbo.
Alberto Corvos, Prime Minister. I write for several ethnic newspapers, and I am also an executive member of the Ethnic Communities Council. So I'm sorry if this is too parochial a question, you know, 2 days from the election, but why should migrants vote for Labour and not the Liberals? What are the most important reasons? And the other one is there are a number of recent studies that show that intakes of migrants are good for the economy of the country, even at times of recession. So why reduce the numbers if it's not because of public opinion pressure or some other reasons?
Well, we're not reducing them beyond where they are now. The question I was asked was when would we put them back up, and I said that would depend upon economic circumstances. As to why migrants should vote for the government, I think the government believes in a multicultural society. John Hewson said multiculturalism is a mistake, to use his words. To quote him, he said that multiculturalism is for certain a mistake. He doesn't believe in the whole multicultural ethos of the country, and of course it is one of the largest communities would be most affected by a change in the social wage of migrant communities, and particularly those who are not fluent in English, who came to this country untrained and unskilled. They would lose Medicare, which is a basic protection, health protection device for them, system to them. They would lose a lot of the award benefits and protections which come to their employment by virtue of the award system. Particularly migrant women would be most hardest hit by the abolition of awards and the movement to individual contracts. Programs like English as a Second Language, on which we have spent a very vast amount of money trying to improve the educational opportunities and work access opportunities of migrant people, would be cut under a Hewson government, and it would mean that basically those supports which do exist in the social fabric of Australia by way of such things as English as a second language, health, education, the rest, would be all things which I think the absence of would cost the migrant communities in particular very dearly. And that's why I think the migrant communities should vote for the government, but most particularly because we actually believe in a multicultural country. We actually like having them here, and the Liberals don't.
Alan Sunderland.
Alan Sunderland from SBS Television, Prime Minister. In recent days, it's been a feature of your speeches and addresses to the public to talk about the chaos that would ensue were a Hewson government to be elected. Given the amount of social disruption you've talked about and also parliamentary disruption in terms of the Hewson government's stated legislative ambitions, do you think in the wildly hypothetical event of a Hewson government we would see a full-term government in Australia? Would it last to 3 years?
Alan, I don't think I can help you with that, but the thing that I can say is, and must say, is that the election of a Hewson government will see Australian life as we know it change. We'll see all the tenets of fairness and decency and equity abolished. We'll see a system that he wants, a model that he proposes, and that his federal president, Ashley Goldsworthy, made very clear in that quotation I read from him, and that is where it'll be ready, steady, go, and everyone is to go for it. The doctors will go and grab money off the patients. The companies will go and grab money off the workers, particularly the weaker ones, women particularly, low-paid people. They'll go and grab them and push them onto peasant wages, and there will be a snatch and grab operation right across the whole economy. The whole decade of decency and fairness and equity and cooperation will go, and as it goes, it'll be gone probably for a very long time, if not forever. We'll have a different sort of country, and we'll try Thatcherism and Reaganism, as John Hewson said, it was never tried properly before. That's what he said, it was never tried properly. He's going to try it properly. That is, he's going to make the going really tough and the pace really willing, so that the goers, as he called them, can go and snatch what they can, and the strong can have the most, and what will be left will be others. The point I'm making is how in that environment can we summon the energy to focus on unemployment? I mean, how in that environment can we get 1 million people back into work experience, to get them trained and back into work? I mean, they'll be just swept to one side in this melee which would follow. This country needs tranquility, it needs focus, it needs all of its energies brought to the one point to deal with unemployment. You'll never deal with it in a greedy snatch and grab operation of the kind that John Hewson is begging Australians to invoke. And that's why I say that whatever they do on the weekend, if they vote for that, that's what they'll get. And whether you can truncate it in the course of one parliament, only time would tell. But I don't think Australians will. I think they understand that Dr Hewson's non-appearances at the press club, his failure to debate, his chaotic incantations at these chaotic, disruptive, disturbing gatherings he's having are a bad sign for Australia and will worry Australians as they might, and that they're not going to be switched on by that appeal to preference and greed, which is what Dr Hewson is really offering.
And a final question, Prime Minister, from Camille Fennell.
Camille Fennell, ABC Radio News. 2 days out from the poll, do you think you'd be in a better position now if you'd been in the Prime Ministership longer? And given your call for the environment movement to take a stand, and your comment in the Toorak bookshop the other day that some people are standing back merely waiting for the result, do you think that you've been deserted, or do you feel deserted by interest groups and the business community?
Well, I think a lot of people have stood up. The arts have stood up. The environment, people associated with the environment today made very strong statements. Quite a lot of groups have actually stood up and been counted. The National Book Council on that day was standing up. And I think this is important, that people actually say, we don't like this. We're not going to regress back to some sort of dark past. We're not going to go back to the bad old days of them and us and confrontation and division. So I think that is true. There can be more of it, of course. There can be more of it. People should stand up and have their say. And a lot of the business community who have been principal beneficiaries from this government have been quiet, or they've been talked down by their organisational leadership, so that individually they've been discouraged from saying things, lest they fear discrimination from an opposition which has been, as they said themselves, taking a list of all those who've demurred from their policies. So this sort of implied intimidation from the opposition has no doubt kept many people quiet. But that's the kind of country you'd get if they get up. And that's why I say, if anyone in the media wants to do what I think's right by this country in terms of the future, they should expose the opposition's true policy weaknesses, and in these last days remind the community that we have something better in Australia than the greed is good notion, and that Dr Hewson doesn't have a policy which will stand the test of time, and it won't change Australia for the better.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you, Mr Keating, for turning up to face the sometimes scratchy and discordant music, as you put it. You mentioned in your speech, briefly at least, elaborately transformed manufacturers, and I know you've never thought of our club tyres being fitting that description. We have finally taken notice, and while the silk is imported, it is in fact Australian made. Value added here from Stanford. Thank you very much.
Jim, could I thank you and the Press Club again for another well-chosen gift. And It may be a bit bright for me, this one, but still. But I am pleased to be here. I think you are all important if Dr. Hewson doesn't, and I think you are worth talking to if he holds you in contempt. And the fact is, he has held you in contempt. You shouldn't forget it, and you should therefore treat him with the contempt he's brought upon himself.